So a while back I did a video about GPU and CPU bottlenecking, and we learned that if you have a weak CPU and a nice GPU, your CPU is going to hold you back from enjoying your GPU. That kind of gets like a tongue twister after doing that for a while. So we had an i3-6100, we put it with a 5600 XT, and the CPU was pegged out, and the GPU was just not giving me all the beans that I needed to do. I mean, running at 1080p, I had a lot of stutters and hiccups and everything, and what it was that the CPU, well, not this one, but the CPU that I was using just, it couldn't keep up with it. So guys, when you're buying a CPU or GPU, make sure you have a good balance. You know, if you have a, I don't know, a second gen or third gen, just don't go out and buy a 3000 series graphics card, because you're probably going to end up holding yourself back with an older CPU, and vice versa. You know, don't get a Ryzen 9 5000 and then, you know, put in a GT 710. Yeah, you got to have a good balance. You know, typically I try to look at what the hardware is at the time and maybe go up a couple of years or two. Definitely check out some forums, do some research, and do your homework when you're trying to figure out a good GPU to CPU balance. I just kind of look and just see what I find on the internet and then just kind of determine from there. So with that being said, I did a video on this computer, well, on this setup. It was an i7 3rd gen. We popped in a 2080, and my 2080 just could not keep up. I mean, well, not my 2080. The CPU could not keep up with my 2080, and in fact, the performance was pretty bad. I was only getting 30 frames per second at 1080p gaming, which was horrible, and we were using Cyberpunk. Now, my 2080 works with Cyberpunk perfectly because I'm using a Ryzen 9 5000, so I got a good, decent balance. They're able to complement each other, and one is not holding each other back. So I wanted to take a real look at this one. I actually had this video card in here. I don't know if you can see it in there, but it's a NVIDIA Quadro K2000. Yeah, I know, Quadro K2000. That's all I got for this build, and like I talked about in another video, customer is aware that when new stuff is able to get available, or they're able to get something for a normal price, thank you scalpers, then and miners, we'll be able to pop something in, and I'm not going to charge them or anything like that, so they're already aware of that. So with that video, my CPU was pegged out at 100%. I mean, just 100%, because I got this monster, you know, decent GPU in there. There was no balance. They were not complementing each other. So I wanted to do two things with this video. I wanted to see if the NVIDIA Quadro K2000 can actually keep up and play some Cyberpunk. That's number one. And number two, I wanted to see if I had somewhat of a better balance. I mean, this is not the ideal balance, but if I had a better balance CPU, GPU, am I going to get more frames? And is my CPU really going to bottleneck and just kind of tank like it was? So I got Cyberpunk loaded, and this is the i7 3rd gen, 16 gigs of RAM. Very nice combo with the K2000. The K2000 only has 2 gigs of DDR5, and these Quadros are not ideal for gaming. You can game with them, but don't expect to get the world's best gaming experience with it. But it's enough to get your feet wet, and they're pretty cheap. This card is like 20 bucks, and you can play some Fortnite and all that stuff. So definitely check out the review video on that one and what we talked about and what we figured out. So I have Cyberpunk, it's up and it's loaded, and if you want to look, we do have some improvement, and we actually learned that my 2080 was too much for this i7 3rd gen. Before, in the previous video, my CPU was constantly pegged out at 100%, and the 2080 just wanted to keep going, just want to keep running the mile, and they could not keep up with it. Now we're playing this game, and as I started playing this game, we're only getting about 13 frames per second, 15 frames per second. So we're not even reaching the 30 frames per second, and it's no fault of the CPU. It's actually just for the fact that the GPU can't keep up with it. I mean, we are pegged out at 99%. I mean, anything more and yeah, it would just crash. You are able to play Cyberpunk with the K2000, but it's not going to be the best experience. It might be just enough to, I would call it just a demo, just to get your feet wet and whatnot, and then eventually get a more manageable GPU that will complement this CPU over here. But as you're looking, I mean, you got stutters, and this is at 720p settings, by the way. I mean, every now and then the game will pop up to 15, 16. I think the highest I got was 20 frames per second, but for the most part, I'm sticking between average 15 to 20 frames per second. It is playable, but it's not going to be the best experience that you had. So pretty much, like I said, what I want to talk about this video is just kind of give you an example that if you have a GPU that's too much for your CPU, your usage is just going to be through the roof. And the same breath over here, if you have a GPU that can't keep up with your CPU, then, I mean, we're only utilizing 34, actually I was looking at the wrong one, yeah, 38%, 44%. Let's kind of move it up over here. 32. We kind of hit about 38 to 40% CPU usage. Ideally for this combination, I'd probably recommend, and I've talked about this before, a 2060 is actually a good balance for this i7 3rd gen. RX 570s are amazing. I love them if you could get them for less than $200. So just something to consider. Just wanted to show that, number one, you can play Cyberpunk with a Quadro K2000, but if you're going to be using an i7 3rd gen, they're still pretty good CPUs. They will hold up, but you need to make sure that you have a good GPU that's not too powerful for it or too weak for it, and that will actually complement it. So just a quick video. Thanks for watching. Definitely comment down below. Let me know what you think about this balance, this contrast, and what you would do to actually complement this computer. If you like the video, hit the like button. Subscribe if you're not. And as always, we'll see what we come up with next.